I didn't lose my marriage in a fight. There was no slap, no cheating scandal, no screaming match, just a family that didn't accept me. I lost it in silence. In polite greetings that felt cold. In family dinners where my voice disappeared. In the way everyone smiled except when they looked at me. They never said I wasn't good enough. They didn't need to. Because from the very beginning, my in-laws already had a perfect daughter-in-law in mind. And I was never meant to replace her. I was only meant to wait until she returned. My name is Aisha. I met my husband Daniel in Johannesburg. We were both living fast, modern African lives, work deadlines, traffic, ambition, quiet loneliness hidden behind Instagram smiles. I worked in communications for a mid-sized firm in Rosebank. Daniel worked in operations for a logistics company based in Midrand. Our worlds collided through mutual friends at a small housewarming. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud. But he was steady. In a city where people came and went like seasons, Daniel stayed. When he told me his parents lived in Pretoria and were very involved, I took it as a sign of closeness. I grew up believing family mattered. I didn't know that in some homes, family love comes with conditions. The first time I visited his parents' house, I dressed carefully. Neutral colours, covered arms, natural hair pulled back neatly, respectful but modern, the kind of balance African women are taught to master early. Their house was beautiful, gated estate, clean lines, quiet wealth, nothing extravagant but everything intentional. His mother, Mrs. Nandi, hugged me lightly. "You're welcome," she said. Not warmly, not coldly. Just measured. His father, Mr. Thomas, shook my hand and nodded. That was it. I told myself not to overthink it. African parents don't rush affection. During the courtship, I noticed small things. They never asked about my family beyond polite questions. They never asked about my dreams. They never asked how I felt about marriage. They asked about timelines. When Daniel proposed, they didn't celebrate. They approved. That word stayed with me. Our wedding was elegant, city-style, tasteful, minimal drama. Mrs. Nandi insisted on choosing most things to avoid embarrassment. My suggestions were acknowledged, then adjusted. Still, I told myself marriage was about compromise. After the wedding, things shifted quietly. Sunday lunches became formal evaluations. Every meal felt like a test. Every word felt like it carried weight. If I spoke too much, it was noted. If I spoke too little, it was noted. No one corrected me directly. They corrected me through silence. Then one name started appearing casually. Lebo. She's doing so well in corporate banking. She always knew how to behave. Lebo understands family values. At first, I assumed Lebo was a cousin. She was. Lebo was the woman they had chosen for Daniel years before I arrived. Same church. Same private schools. Same social circle. Their families had history, plans, expectations. But Lebo had left South Africa for graduate school abroad. And while she was gone, life moved on. Daniel met me. And I fit, just not the way they wanted. Everything became clear the day Lebo returned. She walked into a family dinner like she never left, confident, polished, familiar. She hugged Mrs. Nandi tightly. Mr. Thomas smiled openly, the first real smile I had seen from him. "This is my daughter," Mrs. Nandi said proudly. I was sitting right there. From that day forward, the atmosphere changed. Lebo didn't have to try. She already belonged. If she cooked once, it became a reference point. If she spoke, people listened. If she joked, laughter followed naturally. When I did the same things, the room stayed neutral. Daniel noticed the tension, but avoided confronting it. "They don't mean harm," he said. "They've just known her longer." But knowing someone longer doesn't justify erasing your wife. Slowly, Daniel began to change. He stopped correcting his parents. Stopped defending my boundaries. Stopped noticing when I withdrew. At gatherings, Lebo sat close to him, not inappropriately, just familiarly. Sometimes she reminded him of stories from childhood. Sometimes she talked about future plans they once shared. No one stopped her, including him. One evening, driving back to Johannesburg after a family lunch, I asked the question that had been eating me alive. If Lebo never left, would you have married me? He didn't answer immediately. In African marriages, silence carries truth. They wanted her, he finally said. I chose you. But choice without protection is abandonment. Things became unbearable after that. Family meetings where I wasn't informed. Decisions made without consulting me. Subtle comments about compatibility and alignment. One night, Daniel's mother invited me for tea. She spoke softly, carefully. You are a good woman, she said. But sometimes good is not the same as suitable. That was when I understood. They weren't angry with me. They simply never wanted me. I moved out quietly. No drama. No shouting. No social media posts. Just dignity. Months passed. Daniel stayed. The family returned to praising Lebo, even though she left again, this time to the UK. And suddenly, the perfect daughter-in-law was gone once more. Years later, I rebuilt my life in Cape Town. New career. New peace. New self-respect. One afternoon, Daniel called. They were wrong, he said quietly. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Aisha did not disappear after she left Daniel's apartment in Johannesburg. She simply became quieter, more deliberate, more careful about where she placed her heart. Cape Town did not heal her immediately. Healing is not a city, it is a process, but Cape Town gave her distance and distance gave her clarity. She rented a small apartment in Observatory, close enough to the city to feel alive, far enough from Pretoria to breathe. Every morning she woke to the sound of traffic mixed with seagulls, brewed her coffee slowly, and reminded herself that peace did not need witnesses. Work became her anchor. She threw herself into projects, accepted responsibilities she once hesitated to take, and learned how capable she truly was when no one was quietly measuring her worth. Colleagues noticed. Promotions followed. Respect grew, not the polite, conditional kind she once received, but the earned kind that comes from consistency. Still, nights were harder. There were evenings when she replayed conversations she never finished, moments she swallowed words to keep the peace. She wondered how something that looked stable from the outside could collapse without a single loud argument. What hurt the most wasn't losing Daniel. It was realizing she had been loyal to a family that never planned to be loyal to her. Months turned into a year. Daniel called occasionally, at first. To check in, then less frequently. His voice always sounded tired. The confidence he once carried had thinned like fabric worn by too much use. He spoke about work stress, about his parents' agging, about responsibility. He never spoke about happiness. Aisha listened politely. She no longer filled silences for him. One afternoon, while walking along Sea Point Promenade, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a mutual friend in Johannesburg. Have you heard? Daniel's family is pushing him again. She didn't reply immediately. She already knew what that meant. Lebo had returned, not physically, but in conversation. Her name resurfaced at gatherings, in phone calls, in careful suggestions disguised as concern. She understands the family. She fits our values. She won't challenge tradition. Aisha understood now what those words truly meant. She won't ask for space. She won't question authority. She won't expect protection. In Pretoria, the pressure tightened around Daniel slowly, the way it always had. His parents framed it as advice, not control, concern, not interference. You tried, Mrs. Nandi said to him one evening, but marriage should bring peace, not constant explanation. Daniel didn't argue. He was tired of explaining. When Lebo visited again, it was casual. A coffee here, a family dinner there, no declarations, no confrontations. Just familiarity returning to its old seat. Daniel noticed how easily his parents relaxed around her, how laughter came back into the house, how conversations flowed without tension. He mistook comfort for compatibility. What he didn't realize was that comfort built on avoidance eventually collapses. Aisha learned about the divorce papers through an email notification. Not from Daniel. From a legal office. She stared at the screen for a long time before closing her laptop. There was no shock, only a quiet confirmation of what she had already accepted. She signed calmly. Not because she was weak, but because she was done fighting battles that were never hers. When the divorce finalized, people reached out. Some apologized, others explained, a few justified. Aisha thanked them and kept her distance. She learned that closure doesn't come from conversations. It comes from choosing not to reopen wounds. 2 years later, she attended a professional conference in Nairobi. It was her first time traveling for work outside South Africa. The city buzzed with ambition, modern, fast-moving, unapologetic. During a panel discussion, she met Kofi. He wasn't charming in a loud way. He listened the way Daniel once had, but with something Daniel lacked: firmness. They spoke about work first, then life, then values. Kofi didn't rush intimacy, he didn't perform interest, he was consistent. When she mentioned her past, he didn't flinch. "That sounds heavy," he said, "but it also sounds like you survived something important." No one had said that to her before. When Kofi visited her in Cape Town months later, he asked to meet her friends. He didn't hide her existence. He didn't protect his family from her truth. When he finally asked about meeting his parents, he said something that settled deeply in her chest. "If anyone disrespects you," he said calmly, "that conversation ends immediately." She believed him not because of his words, but because of his boundaries. Back in Pretoria, Daniel watched his life narrow quietly. Lebo did not return permanently. Her career kept pulling her elsewhere. When she was present, things felt easy. When she left, the house fell silent again. His parents began to age rapidly. Illness crept in, regret followed. One evening, after a long hospital visit, Mrs. Nandi said something she had never said before. "Aisha was patient," she murmured, "too patient." It wasn't an apology. But it was recognition. Daniel didn't respond. He understood now that some realizations come too late to repair anything. Years passed. Aisha married Kofi in a small ceremony overlooking the ocean. No performance, no pressure, just clarity. No one evaluated her that day. No one compared her. No one corrected her joy. When she laughed, it stayed in the room. When she spoke, she was heard. Sometimes, late at night, she thought about that version of herself who tried so hard to belong in a family that had already made its choice. She no longer felt anger toward her. Only gratitude. Because that woman walked away when staying would have cost her everything. And somewhere in Pretoria, a house remained quiet, not because peace had arrived, but because control had finally exhausted itself. The perfect daughter-in-law had never existed. Only women who knew when to stay. And women who knew when to leave. Aisha did not expect forgiveness to arrive when it did. It came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, carried in a message she almost ignored. It was from Daniel. He asked if they could talk. Not to revisit the past. Not to reopen wounds. Just to speak honestly and for the last time. Aisha read the message slowly. She felt no fear, no anger, only a calm curiosity. She told Kofi about it that evening, expecting hesitation. Instead, he nodded. "If it brings you peace," he said, "then you should hear them." They met in a neutral place, a quiet cafe in Sandton, far from family homes and old expectations. Daniel arrived first. He stood when she walked in, his posture unsure, his confidence long gone. He looked older. Not in years, but in weight. "I owe you an apology," he said after they sat down. He didn't waste time, not the polite kind, the real one. Aisha listened without interrupting. "I failed you," Daniel continued. "I chose comfort over courage. I let my family erase you while calling it tradition. I knew it was wrong and I stayed silent." He swallowed hard. "You deserved protection, I gave you distance." Aisha nodded once. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said calmly. "Not for you, for myself." Tears filled his eyes, not because he hoped for reconciliation, but because he finally understood what he had lost. A week later, another message came. This time from Mrs. Nandy. She asked to visit. Aisha hesitated, then agreed on her own terms. Mrs. Nandy and Mr. Thomas arrived at Aisha and Kofi's home in Cape Town on a bright Saturday morning. They brought gifts, not as obligation, but as humility. They sat in the living room, hands folded, voices softer than Aisha remembered. "We were wrong," Mrs. Nandy said, her voice unsteady. "We thought we were protecting our family, instead we broke it." Mr. Thomas spoke next, slowly. "You entered our home with respect, we answered with comparison. That was unfair." There was no defense, no excuses. Only acknowledgement. Aisha accepted the apology not with tears, but with grace. "I needed to hear this," she said, "not because I'm still hurt, but because accountability matters." They left lighter than they arrived. Peace, she realized, did not require forgetting, it required truth. Months later, life shifted again. Aisha discovered she was pregnant on a quiet morning when the ocean air felt unusually still. She held the test in her hand, her heart racing with a joy that felt steady, not anxious. When she told Kofi, he laughed a full, unrestrained sound, then pulled her into his arms and stayed there for a long time. From that moment, everything deepened. Their conversations grew gentler. Their patience widened. Their love softened into something unbreakable. Kofi's parents embraced Aisha without hesitation. They checked on her constantly, not with control but with care. They asked what she needed instead of telling her how to behave. They celebrated her strength, her independence, her voice. No one compared her to anyone else. No one questioned her place. When the baby arrived, a healthy child with curious eyes and a quiet strength, the house filled with warmth. Laughter returned in ways Aisha had never known before. Kofi watched her with awe. "You were always enough," he told her one night as she rocked their child to sleep. They just didn't have the capacity to see it. Years later, when people asked Aisha how she survived rejection, she smiled. She didn't survive it. She outgrew it. Because sometimes, the family that rejects you is only clearing the path for the one that will never make you doubt your worth. And in the end, Aisha learned the truth her younger self needed to hear. Being chosen matters. Being protected matters more. But being fully accepted without comparison is everything.